Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my 2023 college football predictions. So, we're going to be predicting a record for every Power 5 team. And starting off with the ACC. Last in the ACC, I've got Virginia. So, they're not going to be very good this season. They weren't very good last season, and I expect that to stay the same. For the most part, offensively, they have named Monmouth transfer Tony Muskett their starting quarterback after last year's quarterback Brendan Armstrong left in the transfer portal. So, that's a big downgrade. The rest of the offense isn't great, especially their offensive line. Now, defensively for Virginia, they could be a little bit better because they were holding opponents to just 24 points a game last year, and they've returned 6 starters. So that could be a bright spot for the Cavaliers this season, but I see a long season ahead at last place finish in the ACC with a record of 3-9 and 1-7 in conference play. Wins over James Madison, William & Mary, and Georgia Tech. Next, in the ACC, 13th, we've got Virginia Tech. Another team that's going to be near the bottom of the ACC. Their offense could be decent after they made some nice transfer portal additions, such as wide receiver Oli Jennings. But the offensive line could hold the offense back. And then you look to defense, they only returned 5 starters from last year's team. And Virginia Tech, like the other Virginia school, I don't really see them being that good. I have Virginia Tech finishing the record with a record of 4-8, 1-7 conference play, wins over Old Dominion, Rutgers, Marshall, and Virginia. 12th in the ACC, we've got Boston College. So Boston College could be decent, especially their offense, because they've got Emmett Morehead as their starting quarterback, and he was pretty good for them in his limited action last year. Now, they've also got a healthy offensive line, so that is going to help the offense greatly. Now, they did lose their best playmaker in Zay Flowers to the NFL, so they're going to need someone to step up at wide receiver, but the offense could be decent for the Eagles this season. Defensively is a different story. They returned only 5 starters to a team that allowed over 30 points a game last season, and they didn't really make any changes, so Boston College will struggle defensively. Their offense could make them decent, and I have Boston College being a decent team, getting back to a bowl game at 6-6 with a 2-6 record in the ACC. I have BC defeating Northern Illinois, Holy Cross, Virginia, Army, UConn, and Virginia Tech. 11th in the ACC is Syracuse. So Syracuse exceeded expectations last year, where they started off 6-0, ended up going 7-6, and won the Pinstripe Bowl. Now, Syracuse lost a lot of key players from that team, including their best offensive player and star running back Sean Tucker. They also lost 4 key defenders. Offensively, they also lost their offensive coordinator, Robert Aney, probably said his name wrong. But the offense still has quarterback Garrett Schrader and a go-to wide receiver in Andre Gadsden II. Again, I probably said his name wrong. Defensively, I don't expect them to be quite as good. As I mentioned, they lost 4 key starters, and I still think they could be decent, but I've got Syracuse slightly worse than last year, in a similar-ish record, going 5-7, 2-6 in the ACC. Wins over Colgate, Western Michigan, Army, Virginia Tech, and Boston College. 10th in the ACC is Wake Forest. So Wake Forest will have a new face at quarterback after Sam Hartman left in the transfer portal. That means Mitch Griffiths is going to be their starting quarterback, and he will have a good wide receiver core to throw the ball to, consisting of 3 good receivers, Jamal Banks, Taylor Morin, and Donovan Green. Now, the offensive line is a big question for Wake Forest this season after losing 3 of their 5 starters. And then you move to the defensive side of the ball. They lost some starters, and it was also pretty bad last year. So, I would expect a pretty bad defense for Wake Forest, and I think they could be decent. I've got them finishing 5-7, 2-6 in ACC play. Wins over Elon, Vanderbilt, Old Dominion, Virginia Tech, and Syracuse. 9th in the ACC, we've got NC State. So, they lost quarterback Devin Leary in the transfer portal, but brought in Virginia transfer Brendan Armstrong. So the offense has plenty of questions outside of quarterback because receivers are pretty unproven. Their rushing attack was very inconsistent last year. And then you move to the defensive side of the ball. They lost a few key players, but their defense still should be pretty good, as they were good last year, and they should be pretty good once again. I've got NC State, kind of an average team, finishing 6-6, 3-5 in conference play. Wins over UConn, VMI, Virginia, Marshall, Wake Forest, and Virginia Tech. 8th in the ACC, we've got Georgia Tech. So they're a team with potential this season. They could be decent. They brought in Texas A&M transfer Haynes King at quarterback and have named him their starting quarterback. They also brought in wide receiver Dominic Blaylock from Georgia. Now, the offense, they should be decent, although they will need to see a lot of improvement from the offensive line, a unit that allowed 39 sacks a season ago. Defensively for Georgia Tech, they made some solid transfer portal additions to a defense that was already pretty good a season ago. Even though they did lose some key players, I think Georgia Tech should be pretty good this year for them, and finish with a 6-6 record, 4-4 in the ACC. The Yellow Jackets pick up wins over Louisville, South Carolina State, Bowling Green, Boston College, Wake Forest, and Syracuse. Getting into the top half of the teams in the ACC, 7th is Louisville. So Louisville enters a new era. They have no more Wade Cunningham at quarterback, and Jeff Brom is their new head coach. Jack Plummer, a Cal transfer, will take the reins at quarterback, and Louisville did a good job of boosting the offensive line and receiving corps with transfers. Defensively for the Cardinals, they were bad last year, but they bring in new defensive leadership with Ron English and Mark Hagan being co-defensive coordinators. Plus, they returned 6 defensive starters. So I could see improvement on the defensive side of the ball for Louisville, and I think they're going to be a pretty good team, finishing with a 7-5 record, 5-3 in the ACC. Wins over Murray State, Indiana, Boston College, NC State, Virginia, Duke, and Virginia Tech. 6th in the ACC, we've got Pitt. So Pitt brings in Boston College quarterback Phil Jakovic, as he was solid in his 2 seasons at BC, but Pitt lost their leading rusher and their leading receiver this offseason, so that will be 2 big holes they need to fill on the offensive side. And defensively, they lost 2 key starters, including NFL first-round pick Kawaja Cansey along the defensive line, but their defense was great last season, and even after losing some key players, I still think they should be okay on defense once again. But Pitt is a team with potential. If the offense clicks, I could see Pitt being a lot better than this. I've got Pitt finishing 6th in the ACC, 7-5 record, 5-3 in conference play. Losses to Cincinnati, North Carolina, Notre Dame, Florida State, and Duke, but I could see a little bit better of a season for Pitt. 5th in the ACC, we've got Miami. So they were brutal last year in their first year under Mario Cristobal, missing a bowl game. But I expect a bounce-back season for the Hurricanes. I don't think they're going to be elite, but I think they're going to be a lot better than last year and at least make a bowl game, and even a little bit better than that. They're going to have a healthy Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback. They do have 3 new starters along the offensive line, but they should all be pretty good. And defensively, they allowed a lot of big plays and need to cut down on that. But new defensive coordinator Lance Guidry should be able to help Miami, so I think they're going to make a bowl game this season and finish the season with an 8-4 record, 5-3 in ACC play. Losses to Texas A&M, North Carolina, Clemson, and Florida State. 4th in the ACC, we've got Duke. So Duke is one of the more underrated teams in the country. They won 8 games last year and returned 17 starters from that team. Offensively, they've got a good dual threat quarterback in Riley Leonard, who I think is going to have a big season for Duke. They've got a good offensive line as well, and defensively, they allowed 22 points a game last year, and with Mike Elko as their head coach, their defense is going to be good once again. I think Duke's going to surprise a lot of people this year. I've got them winning 8 games once again, finishing season 8-4, 5-3 in the ACC. Losses to Clemson, Notre Dame, Florida State, and North Carolina. 3rd in the ACC, we've got North Carolina. So North Carolina should be pretty good once again. They made the ACC championship game last year, and a big reason why was quarterback Drake May. I'm expecting another huge season from Drake May, and I think he's going to be in the Heisman conversation. Now, North Carolina did lose their top wide receiver, Josh Downs, but they brought in transfers Devontae Walker and Nate McCollum to help replace him. Defensively, North Carolina struggled mightily last year, but 8 starters returned, and they made some solid transfer portal additions to the defense, so I think their defense will still be the weakness of the team, but I think they should be a little bit better than last year. But I think North Carolina's going to be good. They're going to win a lot of games because of Drake May, because he's that good, and I've got them finishing 10-2, 7-1 in the ACC, losses to Clemson and South Carolina. 2nd in the ACC, we've got Florida State. So I'm expecting big things from Florida State this season. They've got Jordan Travis returning for another season at quarterback. They've got a superstar running back in Trey Benson and a good wide receiver duo of Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. Then you move to defense for Florida State. Jared Verse is one of the best defensive players in the nation. He's back for another season. They brought in Virginia transfer Fentel Cypress to boost an already good secondary. So Florida State is going to have a great season. They're a team capable of winning the ACC and making it to the college football playoff. I've got them finishing the regular season 11-1, 7-1 conference play. Their only loss at Clemson. And first in the ACC for the regular season, we've got Clemson. So they enter this season with Cade Klubnik at quarterback, and he started a few games as a freshman last year, but this will be the first time he's the full-time starter. But around him, they don't have any truly great wide receivers. They're going to need someone to emerge there, but they've got a great playmaker in star running back Will Shipley. And defensively for Clemson, they should be one of the best teams in the country. And I've got Clemson being very good, finishing 11-1, 8-0 in ACC play with their one loss coming against Notre Dame. And the ACC championship game, we've got Clemson against Florida State. So both these teams are great. I could see both these teams in the playoff. I think the winner of this game goes to the playoff. I've got Florida State because Clemson already beat them, and a big reason why I think they beat them in the regular season is Clemson at home. So I've got Florida State dethroning Clemson, making the college football playoff, and winning the ACC championship. Moving on to the Big Ten, starting off in the Big Ten East. At the bottom of the East, we've got Indiana. So they've been really bad over the past 2 seasons, a combined record of just 6-18. Now they did bring in some transfers to help, such as quarterback Taven Jackson, and running back Christian Turner. Now, Indiana hasn't actually announced a starting quarterback because they have had an ongoing quarterback battle between Jackson and Brandon Sorsby. So we don't know who their quarterback will be, but regardless of who's quarterback, I don't really think Indiana will be that good offensively. Defensively, this unit was awful last season. They returned just 2 starters, and I've got another long season ahead for Indiana. I've got them finishing 2-10, 0-9 in conference play, wins over Indiana State and Akron. 6th in the East, we've got Rutgers, so they may be able to sneak their way to a bowl game this season, but I don't think so because their offense should be led by a good ground game, but their passing attack could use some help as quarterback Gavin Winsmat completed under half his passes last season. Now, defensively for Rutgers, they were good last season and they returned 7 starters, so I think their defense could lead them to a few wins along with a strong run game. But I've got Rutgers finishing 4-8, 2-7 in the Big Ten, wins over Northwestern, Temple, Wagner, and Indiana. 5th in the Big Ten East is Michigan State. So Michigan State has really taken a step back after a great 2021. They went 5-7 last year, and I don't expect them to be all that great this year. Michigan State lost some key players this offseason. They lost quarterback Peyton Thorne, their top 2 wide receivers, Keon Coleman and Jaden Reed. So they will be turning to Noah Kim at quarterback, who's only attempted 19 passes in his 3-year college career. And defensively for Michigan State, they should have a decent run defense after they made some nice transfer portal additions along the defensive line, but I think they're going to continue to get torched through the air, as that has been a common theme over the past few seasons. Another rough year for Michigan State. They finished 4-8, 2-7 in the Big Ten, with wins over Central Michigan, Richmond, Rutgers, and Indiana. 4th in the Big Ten East, we've got Maryland. So Maryland's a team that's got some potential this season, but they probably won't get recognized because they're at best the 4th best team in the Big Ten East. But Maryland, they could be good because they return Talia Tagovailoa at quarterback, who is to his brother. Running back Roman Hemby as well. The offensive line could hold the offense back as they return just 1 starter. Moving to the defense, they went through some turnover, especially in their secondary, losing 2 good defensive backs, including NFL first-round pick Deontay Banks. But they brought in some solid transfers to help the defense. So Maryland's a team that I think could be somewhat decent this year. They play a fairly easy schedule, so I've got them 7-5 overall, 4-5 in the Big Ten. Losses to Ohio State, Illinois, Penn State, Nebraska, and Michigan. 3rd in the East is Penn State. So they've got a lot of potential this season. They've got Drew Auer at quarterback, who was a very highly ranked recruit. They've got an outstanding running back duo of Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, and the offensive line should be good as well. Now, they do have questions at wide receiver. And then you move over to defense for Penn State. They lost a few key starters, but they should still be among best in the Big Ten. And I think Penn State will have a very good season, going 10-2, 7-2 in the Big Ten, with their losses coming against the 2 teams I have finishing above them in the East, Ohio State and Michigan. 2nd in the Big Ten East is Ohio State. So yes, I have them finishing 2nd in the East for the 3rd consecutive season, because they've got some questions coming into this season, such as at the quarterback position, because they have not named a quarterback to replace C.J. Stroud, and Ryan Day doesn't sound like he's in any hurry to do so, as they currently have Kyle McCord and Devin Brown battling for the QB1 spot. But Ryan Day said if it goes into the season, it goes into the season. Now, outside of the quarterback position, Ohio State lost 3 of their 5 starters along the offensive line, but they do have a great running back duo of Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. Plus, they've got one of the best wide receiver corps in the entire country, with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Mbuka being the best 1-2 punch, and it's not even close. Defensively for Ohio State, I expect some improvement with their 2nd year under defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, but I've got Ohio State falling short of the Big Ten championship for the 3rd consecutive season, going 11-1 and 7-1 in the Big Ten, with their 1 loss coming for the 3rd straight year against Michigan. And obviously winning the Big Ten East is Michigan, so they're going to be elite once again. They return quarterback J.J. McCarthy. They've got the best running back duo in the country, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. They've got one of the best offensive lines in the country, and defensively they bring back 7 starters to a unit which was really, really good a season ago. So I've got Michigan winning the Big Ten East, beating Ohio State for the 3rd year in a row, and finishing the regular season with a perfect 12-0 record, 9-0 in Big Ten play. Moving to the West in the Big Ten, 7th is Northwestern. They're an absolute mess right now. They only won 1 game last year, and that was again in Ireland, meaning they haven't won a game in the United States since October of 2021. Northwestern did make a big transfer portal move to get Cincinnati quarterback Ben Bryant, and he could make a big impact on offense. Yeah, I don't think he's going to help the team improve drastically overall. Defensively for Northwestern, it is a nightmare, and I think this season is going to be brutal for Northwestern, going 2-10, 0-9 in the Big Ten, wins over UTEP and Howard. 6th in the Big Ten is Nebraska. So Nebraska brings in Matt Rule as their new head coach, and he hasn't exactly been great in his first year with college teams, in his combined first 2 seasons. In his first seasons at Temple and Baylor combined, he has a record of 3-21. So obviously that's not great. But they do bring in Georgia Tech transfer Jeff Sims at quarterback. They've got a solid running back in Anthony Grant and a pair of good transfer receivers. Now, the offensive line isn't great, and neither is the defense. So I've got Nebraska not being great in year one under Matt Rule, going 4-8, 2-7 in the Big Ten. Wins over Northern Illinois, Louisiana Tech, Purdue, and Northwestern. Fifth in the Big Ten West is Purdue. So a lot of changes for Purdue this offseason. They lost head coach Jeff Brom to Louisville. They lost quarterback Aiden O'Connell to the NFL, and also they lost leading receiver Charlie Jones to the NFL. Now, they did get Texas transfer Hudson Card at quarterback to replace Aiden O'Connell, so that should definitely help the offense. And on the defensive side of the ball, they weren't bad last year, but they weren't great. But they should show improvement after they hired former Illinois defensive coordinator Ryan Walters as their head coach, who had one of the best defenses in the country. But Purdue could be a decent team this year. I don't think there'd be anything too crazy. I've got them just missing out in a bowl game, going 5-7, 2-7 in the Big Ten. Wins over Fresno State, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Indiana, and Northwestern. Fourth in the Big Ten West is Minnesota. So they're a team that I think will take a big step back after a solid 2022 season where they went 9-4. They lost quarterback Tanner Morgan. They lost star running back Muhammad Ibrahim. And they also lost 3 starters along the offensive line. And then you look to defense. They lost some key players on all 3 levels of their defense. So new faces entered the starting lineup for Minnesota. And I think they could be okay, but they've got a tough schedule. So I've got them going 6-6, 4-5 in conference play. Wins over Nebraska, Eastern Michigan, Northwestern, Louisiana, Michigan State, and Purdue. Third in the West, we've got Illinois. So they were a big surprise last year, going 8-5 and having one of the best defenses in the country. I think they're going to take a small step back because you looked at their offense, they lost quarterback Tommy DeVito and superstar running back Chase Brown. They also lost defensive coordinator Ryan Walters, who, as I mentioned a second ago, is now head coach at Purdue. And they also lost key defensive players such as superstar corner Devin Witherspoon, who is a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. But they still should have a good defense, especially their defensive front. But I just think Illinois will take a slight step back because they lost a lot of guys who they were really key players for them and a lot of production. So I think Illinois goes 8-4, 6-3 in the Big Ten, losses to Kansas, Penn State, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Second in the Big Ten West is Iowa. So Iowa ended up playing for the Big Ten championship last season, but they were pretty bad, especially offensively. They brought in Cade McNamara to be their starting quarterback, which should help. And they also have running back Caleb Johnson, who should be pretty good. Defensively for Iowa, they're always elite, and they should be good on defense once again. I have Iowa going 10-2, 7-2 in the Big Ten, losses to Penn State and Wisconsin. And I do think 10-2 is a little bit too good for Iowa, but they play a very easy schedule. And winning the Big Ten West, I've got Wisconsin. So they were terrible last season, but they made a lot of changes this offseason. They hired Luke Fickell as their head coach. They brought in SMU transfer Tanner Mordecai at quarterback. They still have got an elite running back in Braylon Allen. So the offense, they should be a lot better for Wisconsin, more well-balanced, and be able to throw the ball more. And then you look to defense. Their defense was good last year, and they returned 8 starters. So I have Wisconsin with a great bounce-back season. I think they're going to go 11-1 and 8-1 in the Big Ten in their first year under Luke Fickell. Only loss is to Ohio State. And like I said with Iowa, I think this is slightly too good. I don't really think Wisconsin deserves 11 wins. I think they're more like a 10-win team. But again, they play a very easy schedule because they play in the Big Ten West. And the Big Ten championship game, Michigan versus Wisconsin. I think this is going to be a pretty good game. Both these teams, I think, will have really, really good seasons. But I think Michigan's the better team. I've got them undefeated coming into this game. And they may be the best team in the country. I've got them winning the Big Ten. Moving on to the Big 12. 14th in the Big 12, we've got Iowa State. So Iowa State probably isn't going to be all that great because they're going to be without some key players who are suspended due to gambling allegations. And one of those players is quarterback Hunter Deckers. Iowa State also lost their top wide receiver Isaiah Hutchinson to the NFL and several key defensive players. I think this is going to be a very long season for Iowa State, finishing 2-10, 0-9 in the Big 12. 13th in the Big 12, we've got Houston. So Houston enters their first year in the Big 12. They did lose quarterback Quentin Tune, but they added a solid transfer in former Texas Tech quarterback Donovan Smith. Plus, they've got good running backs and good receivers. So offensively, they should be pretty good. Defensively, they gave up 32 points a game last year, and they returned just 4 starters. That's going to be a major weakness of the Cougars. And in their first season in the Big 12, I've got them 4-8, 2-7 in conference play. Wins over UTSA, Rice, Sam Houston, and West Virginia. 12th in the Big 12 is Cincinnati. So, like Houston, they're in their first year in the Big 12, and they might not be all that great this year. They lost head coach Luke Fickell, after he left for Wisconsin. They brought in a new quarterback in Emory Jones, who I don't really think is all that great. He's a good runner, but as a passer, he's not all that great. Their receiving core isn't that good. Their offensive line only returns one starter. But if Cincinnati is good this year, it will be because of their defense, which was great last year, and they returned several key starters. So in their first year in the Big 12, I think Cincinnati will be not great, going 5-7, 2-7 in Big 12 play. Wins over Eastern Kentucky, Pitt, Miami, Iowa State, and Houston. 11th in the Big 12 is West Virginia. So West Virginia really isn't that good. They went 5-7 last year, and this year I don't really think they're going to be all that great. They still haven't named a starting quarterback, and they have an ongoing battle between Garrett Green and Nico Marcholi. I probably said his name incorrectly. The offensive line should be pretty good for West Virginia, though, so that is a good thing. Defensively, they allowed 33 points a game last year, and haven't done much to address that, as that will continue to hold this team back. West Virginia will finish with a 4-8 record, 3-6 in the Big 12. Wins over Duquesne, Oklahoma State, BYU, and Cincinnati. 10th in the Big 12 is Oklahoma State. So they've been pretty good as of late, but they weren't amazing last season, going just 7-6. Now, Oklahoma is not in a very good spot as we head into this season. They've currently got 3 quarterbacks battling for the starting job, those being Michigan transfer Alan Bowman, Garrett Rangel, and true freshman Zane Flores. So Oklahoma State has said they might play multiple quarterbacks, but there's a lot of uncertainty for Oklahoma State at the quarterback position. But whoever is that quarterback should be helped out by a good ground game. And then defensively for Oklahoma State, they aren't looking great as they return just 2 starters and are transitioning into a new defensive system. So I've got Oklahoma State decent, not great, 7-5, 4-5 in the Big 12. Losses to Kansas, Kansas State, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and UCF. 9th in the Big 12 is BYU. So they were decent last year, going 8-5, but I don't think they're going to reach 8 wins this season as they lost starting quarterback Jaron Hall and also their top wide receiver Puka Nacua. They brought in transfer quarterback Keon Slovis, but I don't really think he's all that good. And the defense for BYU struggled last season. They did make some improvements, but I don't really think this will be a great season for BYU. I have got them finishing 6-6, 4-5 in Big 12 play. Wins over Southern Utah, Sam Houston, Cincinnati, Texas Tech, and Iowa State. 8th in the Big 12 is Baylor. So they've taken major steps back after winning the Big 12 championship in 2021. They went just 6-7 last year. The offense wasn't great. I do think they will be a bit better, especially offensively, this season. But Baylor should also be better defensively this season, and I would expect a slight improvement from last season. I've got Baylor going 7-5, 5-4 in the Big 12. Losses to Utah, UCF, Kansas State, TCU, and Texas. 7th in the Big 12, getting into the top half, is Kansas. So it is rare to see Kansas being predicted this good, but they were good last season, and they played over half the season without their starting quarterback Jalen Daniels, who was a Heisman contender before he got hurt. Now, Daniels is back under center for the Jayhawks this season, and their offense should be good once again. Defensively for them, it wasn't great, and I would expect slight improvement, although they did lose starters along the defensive line, but they boosted their secondary. Kansas goes 8-4, 5-4 in conference play, lost to Texas, UCF, Texas Tech, and Kansas State. Very good season for the Jayhawks. 6th in the Big 12 is TCU. So they had a miraculous run to the national championship game last year, but I don't see a repeat of that because they lost several key players. They lost quarterback Max Duggan, their leading receiver Quentin Johnston, their star running back Kendre Miller. Now they do have Chandler Morris at quarterback, who could be good, and their defense should be pretty good as well. I still think TCU is going to be a good team, not quite a top 5 national team, but I've got TCU going 8-4, 5-4 in the Big 12, losses to Kansas State, Texas, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma. 5th in the Big 12, we've got UCF. So they're coming off a great season, and they should be a good team once again in their first season in the Big 12. They've got a good dual threat quarterback in John Rice Plumlee returning, and he has good weapons with R.J. Harvey being a good running back and a good receiver pair of Kobe Hudson and Javon Baker. Defensively, I would expect UCF to take a slight step back because they did lose 3 starters in the secondary, but I still think they should be a pretty good team. I've got them finishing with a respectable 9-3 record. 6-3 in the Big 12, losses to Kansas State, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech. 4th in the Big 12 is defending Big 12 champion Kansas State. So they're coming off a Big 12 championship win, and they should be pretty good once again. They've got quarterback Will Howard returning, and they've also got a great offensive line. Now they do need to replace do-it-all running back Deuce Vaughn. Now defensively for Kansas State, they will take a step back. They won't be quite as good, but they should still be solid. I've got them going 10-2, 7-2 in the Big 12, lost to Texas Tech and Texas. 3rd in the Big 12 is Texas Tech. So they're a sleeper team this year, and I think they're going to be pretty good. The offense was good last year. They returned quarterback Tyler Schuff and their top receiver, Jared Bradway. Now, their offensive line will need to play better. but their offense should be pretty good this season. Defensively, it has potential even after a rough 2022 because they've returned 6 starters. So Texas Tech, a potential to be a sleeper team this season. I've got them going 9-3, 7-2 in the Big 12 losses to Oregon, Kansas State, and BYU. Second in the Big 12, we've got Oklahoma. I have them having a big bounce-back season after a terrible first season under Brent Venables. They made a ton of transfer portal additions to help the defense. And the offense still has quarterback Dylan Gabriel, who should be pretty good, and they've got a good 1-2 punch at running back. So Oklahoma's due for a big bounce-back season. I've got them going 10-2, 7-2 in the Big 12 losses to Kansas and Texas. And winning, my first place team in the regular season for the Big 12, I've got Texas. So they should be pretty good this season. They've got Quinn Ewers at quarterback returning. He's got a great wide receiver core, including Xavier Worthy, Georgia transfer A.D. Mitchell, and a talented tight end Javion Sanders. Now, they did lose superstar running back Bijan Robinson, but their pass game should be able to make up for it because I think they're one of the better passing attacks in the country. Defensively for Texas, they lost a few starters, but should still be decent. I've got Texas going 10-2, 8-1 in conference play, losses to Texas Tech and Alabama. In the Big 12 championship game, Oklahoma and Texas for the final time before they depart for the SEC next season. I've got Texas beating Oklahoma twice this season and winning the Big 12 championship. Moving on to the Pac-12, this will be the final season for the Pac-12, and I think it should be a really, really good season. One of the best seasons for the Pac-12 is their final one. Getting right into things, last in the Pac-12 at 12, we've got Stanford. This is going to be a long season for Stanford. New head coach Troy Taylor. Not many good players on the roster. They lost quarterback Tanner McKee. They do still have a good running back and a good tight end. Running back being E.J. Smith, tight end being Benjamin Urasek. The offensive line is going to be awful, and the defense is going to be awful as well. Long season ahead for Stanford. They finished 2-10, 0-9 in the Pac-12. Wins over Sacramento State, who's an FCS team, and Hawaii. 11th in the Pac-12 is Colorado. So they're a very interesting team with Deion Sanders now at head coach and bringing a whole ton of transfers with him. Colorado's offense should be great. They've got Shedeur Sanders at quarterback, and Travis Hunter is a wide receiver corner hybrid who should be extremely good for the Buffaloes this season. Defensively for Colorado, they gave up almost 45 points a game last season and didn't do a whole ton to fix that as most of their upgrades were on offense. So Colorado should be able to score, yet not stop anyone. I've got Colorado 3-9, 1-8 in the Pac-12, their first year under Deion Sanders. Wins over Nebraska, Colorado State, and Stanford. 10th in the Pac-12, we've got Arizona State. So Arizona State's another team in a rough spot. They've got new head coach Kenny Dillingham, and they've named true freshman Jaden Rashada their starting quarterback. And they should have a solid receiving core, but the offensive line has 4 new starters, and the defense is a major concern because they allowed over 30 points a game last season, and brought in some transfers, but I don't think they're going to make a massive impact. Arizona State goes just 3-9, 1-8 in the Pac-12, wins over Southern Utah, Fresno State, and Colorado. 9th in the Pac-12 is Cal. So Cal's a team that's got some decent potential. The defense should show improvement, but offensively there is some questions. They bring in TCU transfer Sam Jackson, the 5th, to be their starting quarterback, and I have concerns about an offensive line that was bad last year. But they do have some good playmakers on offense, such as wide receiver Jeremiah Hunter and running back Jaden Ott. So Cal has some potential this season, but I don't really think they're going to be all that great, finishing 4-8, 2-7 in the Pac-12. Wins over North Texas, Idaho, Arizona State, and Stanford. 8th in the Pac-12, we've got Arizona. So they've been improving over the past few years, and I expect more improvement from the Wildcats this season. They've got a great quarterback, or they should have a good offense in general. They've got a good quarterback, Jaden DeWar, returning, and a good wide receiver duo as well. The defense is a different story. Their defense was awful last year and only returned 3 starters. They did bring in a few players from the portal that should help the defense, but I've got Arizona getting to a bowl game this season, going 6-6, 4-5 in the Pac-12, wins over Northern Arizona, UTEP, Stanford, Oregon State, Colorado, and Arizona State. 7th in the Pac-12 is Washington State. So they're an interesting team. Offensively, they returned quarterback Cameron Ward, who was good in his first season for them last year, but they lost their top 4 wide receivers. They're going to need a good target for Ward, and also they're going to need better offensive line play after the offensive line was bad last year. Defensively, they should continue to be good, and I've got Washington State having a pretty good season, going 7-5, 5-4 in Pac-12 play. Losses to Wisconsin, Oregon State, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. 6th in the Pac-12 is UCLA. So they're definitely going to take a big step back this season after they lost quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson, running back Zach Charbonnet, and wide receiver Jake Bobo. So that leaves the Bruins in a strange spot at quarterback. They've got a 3-way quarterback battle going on between last year's backup Ethan Garbers 5-star freshman Dante Moore, and Kent State transfer Colin Sheely. So the defense was a concern for UCLA last season, but they should see improvement with 8 starters returning. I've got UCLA finishing 6th in the Pac-12 with a 9-3 record, just because the Pac-12 is going to be that good this season. Losses in the Pac-12 to USC, Utah, and Oregon State. 5th in the Pac-12 is Oregon State, so they should be pretty good this year. They went 10-3 last year and made moves to ensure another good season. On the offensive side of the ball, they brought in Clemson transfer DJ Uyunglele. They've got a great running back in Damian Martinez, so their offensive line is great. So they should be really good on offense as long as DJ can play well. And defensively, they lost 4 key starters, but they should still be okay. Their defense may take a slight step in the wrong direction, but I still think Oregon State should have a really good season. 9-3, 6-3 in conference play. Losses to arguably the best teams in the Pac-12, Utah, Washington, and Oregon. 4th in the Pac-12, we've got Oregon. So Oregon went 10-3 last year, and they should be quite good once again. They've got Bo Nix coming back to lead what should be a high-powered offense. They're going to have a great run game with Bucky Irving as a good running back. And defensively, Oregon lost 2 key starters, those being first-round pick Christian Gonzalez as well as Noah Sewell. But they returned 7 defensive starters, so they should be pretty good there. I've got another good season for Oregon going 10-2, 7-2 in conference play. Losses at Utah and at Washington. 3rd in the Pac-12 is Utah. So the back-to-back Pac-12 champion may come to an end. That streak may come to an end this season. Quarterback Cam Rising is back, but he's coming off a torn ACL, and that may affect his rushing ability, especially early in the season. Although he is going to be good to go for Week 1. But Utah should have a good rushing attack with DeQuinton Jackson back for another year at running back. And they should also have a good offensive line. And defensively, the Utes are always one of the best in the conference. And I think that trend should continue. Utah goes 10-2, 7-2 in Pac-12 play. Losses to USC and Washington. 2nd in the Pac-12 is Washington. So they're another team that was good last season. I think they're going to take a step forward. Their offense was great last year. Michael Penix Jr. is back at quarterback, and they returned their top 2 wide receivers. The only question for Washington this year is the offensive line, which has 3 new starters. Defensively, they added Oklahoma State defensive back Jabbar Muhammad to boost a pass defense that was bad a season ago. I think Washington's going to be looking really good this season, going 11-1, 7-1 in conference play. Their only loss at USC. And first in the Pac-12, I've got USC. They returned quarterback Caleb Williams, who was the Heisman winner a season ago. They brought in Arizona transfer Jacob Singer to be their go-to wide receiver and replace Jordan Addison. And the USC offense should be unstoppable, one of the best in the country. Defensively, they had major concerns last year. They forgot how to tackle for the last 2 games of the season, which is why they lost both those games. And they brought in some good defensive transfers, but I still have concerns about their defense. I think they'll be a little bit better defensively, but I still don't think their defense will be all that good. But I've got USC another good season going 10-2, 7-1 in Pac-12 play. Losses at Notre Dame and at Oregon. And the Pac-12 championship, USC versus Washington. I've got USC winning that regular season game, but I've got Washington getting revenge in the Pac-12 championship and being 12-1 and winning the Pac-12. And moving on to our final conference, that is the SEC. Starting off in the East, last in the SEC East, we've got Vanderbilt. So they were a surprisingly decent team last year, winning 5 games, upsetting Florida and Kentucky in the process. This season, they could be good once again, but they're going to need some shocking wins to get into bowl game territory. Offensively, they've got a solid quarterback in A.J. Swan and a good receiving core. Defensively, they're terrible, but a season for potential for Vanderbilt. I've got them 3-9, 0-8 in the SEC. Could go better, but I just have a hard time finding conference wins, which is what they're going to need. 6th in the East is Missouri, so I don't think they're going to be especially good. Their offense needs to be better after only scoring 20 points a game last season, and they haven't named a starting quarterback. It could either be Brady Cook or Sam Horn, but whoever it is needs to help the offense score more points. Defensively for Missouri, they were great last year and should have a strong defense once again. I've got the Tigers finishing 4-8, 1-7 in the SEC. Wins over South Dakota, Middle Tennessee, Memphis, and Vanderbilt. 5th in the East is Florida. So there's some changes for Florida. Obviously, no more Anthony Richardson as he's on to the NFL. So they brought in Wisconsin transfer Graham Mertz at quarterback. And Florida should have a great rushing attack with Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne, both great running backs. Now, they will need someone to step up at wide receiver aside from Ricky Pearsall. And defensively for Florida, I don't think they will be great as they only returned 4 starters. I've got Florida going 5-7, 3-5 in the SEC. Wins over McNessie, Charlotte, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. 4th in the SEC is Kentucky. So They're a team that's going to take a slight step back after last season. They brought in Devin Leary to replace Will Levis at quarterback, and they've got a great receiving core, but the offensive line will need to play a lot better after being bad last season. And defensively for Kentucky, they should be pretty good, so I've got them going 7-5, 3-5 in the SEC. Losses against Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Alabama, and South Carolina. Third in the SEC East is South Carolina. I think they're going to be pretty good this year. Spencer Rattler returns for another season. He's got some good playmakers around him, such as all-purpose back Carrion Joyner and wide receiver Juice Wells. Now, the South Carolina offensive line is a concern, and defensively, they're a little bit weaker than last year after losing standout corner Cam Smith, but South Carolina still should be pretty good. I've got them being 8-4, 5-3 in the SEC. Losses to Georgia, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Clemson. Second in the SEC East, we've got Tennessee. So I think Tennessee's being a little bit slept on this year because they were great last season. They're going to take a little bit of a step back, but I don't think it's going to be that big of a step back because they've got Joe Milton, a quarterback, who I'm a huge fan of. He's got an absolute rocket for an arm. And they've got Squirrel White and Brew McCoy set to replace Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman at wide receiver. Plus, they have good running backs in Jalen Wright and Jawari Small, so I think their offense should be just fine. Defensively, they could be okay, and I've got Tennessee with another strong season, finishing 11-1, 7-1 conference play. Their only loss to Georgia. And winning the SEC East, no surprise, it's Georgia. They lost key players such as Stenson Bennett, Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Keely Ringo, and Christopher Smith, but Georgia seems to have an infinite amount of depth. They've got Carson Beck set to take over for Stenson Bennett at quarterback. They've still got Brock Bowers, who's the best tight end in the country by far. And their defense should have the next group of guys ready to step up and become stars. Georgia's set for another massive season. They go 12-0, 8-0 in the SEC play. And moving to the West in the SEC, we've got Mississippi State coming in 7th. So they're going to be shifting away from the air raid after they hired Kevin Barbay as their offensive coordinator. They're still going to throw the ball a lot because they got a good quarterback in Will Rogers. And defensively for Mississippi State, they will be okay. I think Mississippi State's in line for a season around 500. I've got them going 6-6, 2-6 in the SEC. Wins over Southeast Louisiana, Arizona, Western Michigan, Kentucky, Southern Miss, and Arkansas. 6th is Auburn. So they were very active in the transfer portal this season, or this offseason. They brought in Michigan State quarterback Peyton Thorne and boosted the receiving core and the offensive line. And Peyton Thorne was big for Auburn because their offense was not very good last year, especially their aerial attack. And having a quarterback that can be better than what they had last year is going to be pretty big for Auburn. I've got them going 6-6, 2-6 in the SEC. Wins over UMass, Cal, Samford, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and New Mexico State. 5th in the SEC West, we've got Arkansas. So Arkansas's got a lot of potential this season with KJ Jefferson returning at quarterback and a good running back, Rocket Sanders. Those two will give Arkansas a good high-scoring offense and a lethal rushing attack. The defense needs to improve for the Razorbacks after allowing 30 points a game last season, and they used the transfer portal to bring in 10 defensive players, and that should help the unit which held them back last year. I think Arkansas has potential to be decent, but I've got them going 6-6, 2-6 in the SEC. Wins over West Carolina, Kent State, BYU, Auburn, FIU, and Missouri. 4th in the West, we've got Texas A&M. So A&M was very disappointing last year. I've got them having a bounce-back season. They've got a rising quarterback in Connor Wegman, and he's got a good receiver trio of Anaya Smith, Evan Stewart, and Moose Muhammad. The defense was good last year, and they were young last year, but now they've got more experience on the defensive side of the ball. I think the defense as a whole takes a step forward. I think Texas A&M as a whole takes a step forward. Gets to a bowl game, finishes 8-4, 4-4 in the SEC, losses to Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. 3rd in the SEC is Ole Miss. Third in the SEC West is Ole Miss. So they've currently got a quarterback battle ongoing between Spencer Sanders and Jackson Dart. They're yet to name a quarterback, but outside of quarterback, they have a ton of transfers. They brought in receivers Zachary Franklin and Trey Harris. They've still got star running back Quishon Judkins, who should lead an absolutely outstanding ground game. And their defense, they brought in a few transfers for a defense that struggled down the stretch of last season. I think Ole Miss should be pretty good. I've got them going 9-3, 6-3 in the SEC. Losses to Alabama, LSU, and Georgia. 2nd in the SEC West is Alabama. They are massively overrated, and I mean massively overrated. They have a 3-way quarterback battle going on between Ty Simpson, Jalen Miller, and Notre Dame transfer Tyler Buckner. They're very thin at wide receiver, don't have a go-to option there, and they lost key defensive players such as Will Anderson Jr., Brian Branch, and Jordan Battle. Alabama's still going to be pretty good because they are Alabama. They've got Nick Saban as their head coach. but they are massively overrated. I see 2 regular season losses coming for Alabama, going 10-2, 6-2 in the SEC, losses to LSU and Tennessee. And winning the SEC West for the 2nd year in a row, I've got LSU. They bring a strong team coming into this season. They've got dual-threat quarterback Jaden Daniels returning. The offensive line should be much better this season, and they've got a great group of pass catchers. Then defensively, they should be good once again. Harold Perkins should turn into an absolute monster this season, and I've got LSU winning the SEC West for the 2nd straight season, going 11-1, 8-0 in the SEC, with their 1 loss coming week 1 against Florida State. And the SEC title game, LSU versus Georgia. 2 teams that I have not losing an SEC championship game throughout the regular season, but I've got Georgia winning the SEC championship again, and another undefeated season. And I know that was all the conferences, but you always include Notre Dame with the Power 5. So my Notre Dame prediction. So Notre Dame is a team that is slightly underrated. They're going to be pretty good this year. They brought in Sam Hartman, who is going to greatly elevate their offense, especially their passing attack. Now, they did lose star tight end Michael Mayer, but they've got several guys capable of stepping up in the wide receiver room, and they should have a great rushing attack with star running back Audrey Estime. Defensively, they lost a few key players along the defensive line, including sack leader Isaiah Foskey, but the defense should still be pretty good. And Notre Dame is a tough team to predict because they play a very difficult schedule with home games against Ohio State and USC and a road game against Clemson. But I've got the Irish going 11-1 with their 1 loss coming against Ohio State. And now my college football playoff predictions. At 1, I've got the 13-0 SEC champion Georgia. 2, I've got the 13-0 Big Ten champion Michigan. 3, I've got the 12-1 ACC champ Florida State. And 4th, it is a true coin flip between an 11-1 Notre Dame team that played a very tough schedule or a 12-1 Pac-12 champion. It could go either way. Let me know in the comments for that who you have in that scenario. A 12-1 Washington who only lost 1 game that was on the road to USC, or Notre Dame who lost 1 game which was at home to Ohio State in a very close game. But my playoff predictions, who I think will win the semifinal games, Georgia against either Washington or Notre Dame. Georgia wins. I don't really think Washington or Notre Dame would get the win, although I think they could, but it would be close. And then Michigan against Florida State, another very close game. I've got Michigan winning, and then the national championship game between Georgia and Michigan, what a lot of people projected to be the national championship game last year, obviously did not happen, was Georgia against TCU instead. This year, I think Michigan is the best team in college football. They've got the most well-rounded, complete team, but I just do not trust them to get the job done. I do not trust Michigan to win the national championship, so I've got Georgia getting their first three-peat in college football since Minnesota did it nearly a century ago, from 1934 to 1936. So I've got Georgia winning 3 straight national championships, defeating Michigan in the national championship game. But those are my 2023 college football predictions. Let me know in the comments who you've got winning the national championship and what your 4 playoff teams are. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, turn notifications so much as I upload videos. I do my best to post as often as possible. Let me know in the comments if you agree with my predictions, disagree, and why. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But that's all for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.